Hello, everybody. Jacob Tucker here. It is a Friday night at midnight, as you can see on my computer here. Instead of going out to the bars in the city, I decided to make a tutorial on how to get your first DApp running. So, this is going to be a really exciting session. Today, we are going to be deploying a Hello World DApp. We are going to be using the Flow blockchain in order to, deploy smart contracts and all this complicated stuff that you might not know, and that's totally okay. But the final DApp application, we call it a DApp, is going to be or one in which you're going to have some sort of a greeting on the blockchain like hello world, and then we're going to be able to read that and then change it to something like goodbye world and then read that again. So you can also follow this completely in a written format if you want. I'll leave the link to this page in the description, but I'm just going to be walking you through this quick start. And we're also going to be using SvelteKit for the front end framework. However, we also have tutorials for Next.js, React, or Swift UI if you're interested in mobile development, but we're using SvelteKit today. So, step one, and again, this is for people who have never coded before. So, step one is to install these three things. The way you do that, if you have any questions, you can ask in the Emerald City Discord. There's no stupid questions. But the way to do this is to just open up a terminal on your computer. So if you're on Windows, I use Command Prompt or just PowerShell. If you're on Mac, it actually tends to be easier. You can just use the terminal on Mac. Same with Linux, and install these three things. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this command and paste it into our terminal. Now, what that's going to do is basically bring this project, this completed DApp, into our computer. Okay, so let's go ahead and cd into that into that directory. Now the first thing we want to do is run npm install, or just short npm space I. What that's going to do is just install all of the dependencies into our project. So this DApp relies on some libraries and stuff like that. So we're just going to quickly install to make sure that our application is ready to go. And what I'm doing now is just following, these steps here. So we've already gone into our directory. We're installing, and then we're going to start the server in a second here. But I'm going to just give that a second. So let's just wait. And I'll actually, while this is going, I'm going to open up another terminal and cd into that directory again. And then I'm going to do code space dot. And this is going to open VS Code. Again, if you haven't coded before, I would recommend VS Code. It's a great code editor. And so now we are inside of our project, and you can actually see all of the code in this project. Now, I'm going to run through this code in a bit. But one thing that we should do is rename .env.example to just .env, right? Because this is just some like private, just configurables that we're going to be using for our project. So the only one we have here is just telling us that we want our DApp to look at emulator. Now, emulator is like a very, very test slash development blockchain. It's like, Flow blockchain is three networks related: emulator, testnet, and mainnet. Emulator is just for developing and testing. Testnet is for more official testing, and then mainnet is the real deal. So we're going to be using emulator today just to sort of get our DApp, just to play around with our DApp. So let's go ahead and run npm run dev in the first terminal. Now that's going to actually, start the DApp. It's, we're going to be able to open it in a browser. So if we actually open this up, we should see that it loads now so actually it loaded pretty quickly. That's great. So here we go. And it might do some like weird styling thing for a second, but here we go. So once it loads, you'll see that it's pretty self-explanatory, right? It's just a simple application that lets us read and write from the Flow blockchain. Now, you'll notice that if I click connect, nothing actually happens. And that's because, or it just says it, right? It says refuse to connect. Now that's because we haven't actually started the local blockchain, the local emulator on our system. So the reason we had to install the Flow CLI is because we're going to be, using the Flow blockchain. So in our second terminal, let's run Flow emulator. And by the way, you'll know that the Flow CLI is installed if you run Flow space version. See, it returns a version here, so that's good. So now we can run Flow emulator start -v, and that will actually start a local Flow blockchain running on our computer. Now in the third terminal, let's cd into our directory again. Let's run flow project deploy. That's going to deploy our contracts to our local blockchain. So you can see, boom, the Hello World contract got deployed. And I'll go over how that's happening. And then let's run flow dev wallet. So flow dev wallet is going to actually start our wallet. So if I refresh this page now, and click connect, it's going to actually come up with a local wallet, which is super nice. And so let me go ahead and click on server's account, and boom, now we can sort of see our DApp here. So let's actually zoom in a little bit and look at read your greeting. So if I click get greeting, you can see it says hello world. Well, let's go ahead and change that. So what if I wanted it to say goodbye world, right? I can change the greeting and it comes up with a transaction, right? This is some fun transaction. You can actually see the cadence code that's running right here, right? And we can click approve. And so now if we go ahead and click get greeting again, it says goodbye world, right? And that's the entire DApp. That's all this DApp is doing. So again, this whole tutorial is really just walking you through how to do that. So we're basically done with the emulator, but I want to walk you through how this is actually happening. So if we click on view script, you'll actually see the exact code that's running to make that script happen. So on Flow, we use, at on flow slash FCL is the library we use. And we use this query function to actually go ahead and query the blockchain to read stuff. Okay, so query is for reading. And we pass in a Cadence script. Now, Cadence is the smart contract language that actually goes ahead and reads from the Flow blockchain, that we use to interact with the Flow blockchain. And a script is just when we are reading from the blockchain. Okay, so this is the Cadence code that's actually interacting with the Flow blockchain to get our greeting, okay, that lives in a smart contract somewhere. So this is the Cadence code, and then this is the FCL code or the JavaScript code that's running that Cadence script. All right, and you can do the same thing for the transaction if you're curious. But what I'm going to do is dive into the code a little bit here. So I'm just going to point some things out just because I don't think it's too important, but just in case you're curious. So if we go into the lib folder, and let me actually increase the font a little bit. We go into the lib folder and then click on flow and then click on config. This is how we are configuring the flow blockchain on our computer. So we are saying, we're actually looking at our env file. So if we go back to our env file, see how we said we want it to be emulator. That's why that's how Flow knows we want it to run on the Flow emulator. Okay, and so these are all the configurables for emulator, testnet, and mainnet. We're actually going to go over testnet in a second here. And then we just configure the application like this. Now, again, I don't want to dive too deep into this, but just in case you're curious and want to dive into it on your own, you can do that. And then also, just like I was showing you here, this, all this FCL and Cadence code, you can actually see that inside the file system. If you go to source lib flow actions get greeting, this is the FCL code that I just showed you, right? So this is the code that's running, and you can see it's calling, or to get the Cadence script, it's actually going into the Flow Cadence scripts folder, and here is the script, right? So it's importing the hello world contract that we deployed to our local Flow emulator, reading the greeting. And so then, this JavaScript code is just, calling that script. And same exact thing for the transaction here. This is the Cadence transaction that's actually changing the greeting on the blockchain. You can see it's calling a function inside the hello world contract. And this is the FCL code that actually is running that, okay? And again, you can dive into this on your own. And the last thing I want to show you here is the actual contract. So this is the Cadence contract that we deployed to the Flow blockchain. In our terminal, when we ran Flow project deploy, it deployed this contract that we're looking at. Now you can see it's very simple. It's just a hello world contract that has a greeting field and then a function to change the greeting where you pass in the new greeting and it just changes it right here. And you can actually, if we go back to the transaction, you can see we're calling that change greeting function right here, right? So great. So that's just a brief introduction to some of the important files. Oh, and if you're curious about how it looks in this front end, you can go to source, roots, and page.svelte. And this is the page where you're seeing some stuff. So if we put in woo right here and save that, you can actually go back to the front end. Oh, oops. And you can see that it now says woo, right? So you can actually make some changes to it, which is pretty cool. But let's actually go ahead and put this on testnet now. So this is where things get a little interesting. And let's actually walk through the checkpoint. So we're at checkpoint 4. We're going to create a testnet account. And so in order to do that, we need to run flow accounts create in another terminal. So actually, let's just go ahead and stop the local emulator and the dev wallet. And let's run flow accounts create just like that. Enter. So account name, it's telling us to name it testnet account. So let's just go ahead and do that. Testnet account. And we want this to be on testnet. Okay. So it's just gonna, wait for a second. It's gonna create an account. And while it does that, let me show you the flow.json. So the flow.json is what keeps track of all of our contracts that we're using. You can actually see that the hello world contract, in the flow.json, we had to put under the contracts object. We have to tell our flow.json where this contract lives. So we told it it lives in source, lib, flow, cadence, contracts, hello world, which is what I showed you right here, right? Um, and so that way, in our deployments object, we can say on the emulator using emulator account, then this emulator account comes with the default flow.json. We want to deploy hello world. But what we just did when we ran flow accounts create is it actually automatically created a testnet account object for us, right? And it puts the private key for that account inside a testnet account private key file that it automatically puts in your git ignore that file so that you don't push this. If you don't understand git, basically git is like a shared space for code. If you're like saving your code on like GitHub or something. So it automatically puts this in git ignore so you don't accidentally push your private keys, which are very private and should never be shared. Of course, this is a test account, so I don't care that I'm showing you this. But you don't want to push this to Git or show other people that. So, anyways, it puts a testnet account object. Now, what we can do is we can go ahead and add a testnet object underneath deployments using testnet account, and in the array put hello world. And remember, flow.json knows what hello world is because we've configured it right here. And just for the record, all these other contracts are just like default contracts that the emulator already deploys for you. Not that big of a deal. But so we put this in our deployments now. What we can do is we can run flow project deploy and then add a network flag that equals testnet. Okay. And so when we do that, it's actually deploying this contract to the real flow testnet. So anyone can now interact with this contract. And you can see it got deployed to this address. And so again, that address is the same one as right here, right? So we can go ahead and copy this one or just copy this one. And now let's go back to our hello world contract and add a new alias for it because this contract now exists on testnet at this address. Okay. So that's super awesome. And now what we can do is go to our env and say, you know what? We want to now be on testnet. So if we go ahead and let's stop our app, just control C and restart it with npm run dev, we don't have to start the local emulator or the dev wallet because remember, now we're on testnet. So if we go ahead back to our local host and refresh the page, I'm hoping this works. I actually truthfully have not tried this yet, so I'm just hoping. But let's go ahead and log out. And let's click connect again. And you can see it actually comes up with these are real wallets, right? Like Blockdo and Dapper Wallet and all these things. Dapper Wallet won't work, by the way. I probably should remove that because with Dapper Wallet, you have to like get your transactions approved. Let's try Blockdo. So let's go ahead and log in with Blockdo. And I'm going to log in with my email. I'm actually going to take this off screen for a second because I don't really want to share this publicly. And so I'm going to type in my email here. Now, when I type in my email and click sign in, it's going to ask me for a 6-digit code. Now that actually gets sent to your email. So I'm currently on my email trying to get what that code is. And I'm going to paste that in really quick and click approve. Okay, so I'm now logged in. Okay, so let's bring this back. So I'm now logged in. And so what we can do is click get greeting. And that just ran on testnet, like the real testnet network. And actually, just to prove this to you, let's go to contractbrowser.com, which is a browser for all contracts on the Flow blockchain. And let's click on mainnet so that it's now on testnet, okay? And we can actually look up, let's go ahead and get our address again, this address for testnet, and type that in, OX, and then the address. And look, it's actually there. So we can see it now on a real testnet, which is super awesome. So let's go ahead and change this. So let's change this to goodbye world. Okay, click change greeting. And it's going to start initializing the transaction, come up with this prompt, and we can approve. And so you can see it's actually running now. So it takes a little bit because, again, this is on a real testnet. And so it has sealed, right, which is super awesome. And actually, let's go to, I think if we go to testnet.flowdiver.io, we can go to this testnet. And let's go ahead and go to the top right and click copy on your address. And you should be able to paste in your address and see your transactions. So we can see this transaction just happened, the hello world contract. So if I click on it, you can see this was the transaction that I just ran, right? At 12:25 on, I'm not out, I'm not out partying. I'm recording this video at 12:25. Go me. And this is the transaction that actually just ran on Flow Testnet, right? Which is super cool to see. And so now if we click Get Greeting again, it says goodbye world. So boom, it works on Testnet. That is awesome. So that's all I wanted to show you today. Again, if you want to try this using Next.js, that tutorial's I think worse at the moment, but you can always go ahead and try other quick starts as well. You can try the non-fungible token one, the fungible token one. There's a bunch of others. But I hope this helped you, and yeah, have a great rest of your day or night. Peace out.